Okay, the secret is out. I am going to be showing you in this video how I turn my legs from this to this and basically take you through my entire quad training workout and the things that I implement into my training in terms of cues, setup, execution technique, all those certain things that have benefited my leg training and have helped me to absolutely blow up my quads. So without further ado, what we're going to do is jump into the video. Okay, so first exercise, as you can see, is the leg extension. But I'm starting off with an isolation exercise to warm up the muscle before I go into my heavier compound exercises. Why? Because this way we can get blood into the muscle, warm up the surrounding joints. So we're getting blood into the quads, making sure that when we move on to our compound exercises, there's a pump in the quads, the blood's readily available, and we're using the quads when we train. And then the joints, our knees. If you go straight into a heavy squat without warming up the joints, you are going to run into a lot of trouble very soon. And in perfect honesty, you're not going to be of a detriment to your heavy hack squats, spoiler, when we move into that for doing this first. You may feel it in your quads more, but how is that a bad thing? Because we're training our quads. Right, in terms of setup, you can see I'm using wrist straps. What this allows me to do is comfortably pull myself into the machine, meaning that when I move the weight, my hips are not shifting and it is solely my quads driving the force. Therefore, my quads are taking the strain and contracting and controlling the movement. Therefore, we're getting more stimulus on the quads and giving it the best opportunity to grow. What I'm also doing is I am not rushing this exercise. It is very important to control the movement and most importantly, control the changes in direction to remove momentum. At the bottom of the movement, I am not using the stretch reflex to bounce out the bottom. I am pausing slightly and then driving with my quads to make sure they are the driving force of the contraction, and I'm not just flinging it up, like I said, using the stretch reflex response. And then when I get to the top, I squeeze at the top, really think about squeezing at the top of my quad. So when you flex your quad, you can feel at the top, there's a little bit that strings off of the hip. That is the part that I want you to focus on when you're contracting the top, not your teardrops, because those will contract very easily at the bottom of the movement. But to get a full contraction and full range of motion, you want to think about really squeezing at the top of your quad. That's a small mind to muscle connection tip for this leg extension exercise. The reason I do it single leg is because, like I said, we're priming the muscle, we're warming up the quads, getting as much blood into the muscle as possible before we move on to our compound movements. Therefore, performing it unilaterally, single leg, is going to allow us to get the same amount of work, the same amount of blood, and work them equally, as opposed to doing it bilaterally, both legs, and your stronger, more neurologically connected leg taking most of the strain in the movement. And that is only going to reflect in your squatting movements where one leg dominates the squat. Okay, so before I move on to hack squat, of course, 4 by 15 each leg is my setup for this pyramid. So 15 reps on my left leg, my leg that I'm less adept to, weaker leg, less connected with side. I'm much better at contracting my right side and I'm stronger on my right side, so I start with my left. 15, take a break, next leg, and obviously rest and go again for the 4. But for hack squats, I do a 5 by 10 rep pyramid. And what you can see already from my setup is I'm lower down on the foot plate. The reason I'm not right to the bottom is because I'm using heel elevated shoes, squat shoes. Therefore, I'm already in a good range of ankle flexion, and lack of ankle mobility does not impact my training. Therefore, I can come up a little bit higher without my heels coming off of the foot plate due to the heel elevation in the shoe. In terms of how wide do you want to stand, I am quite a narrow squatter in terms of this because I'm trying to maximize the use of my quads rather than my adductors and my glutes. So coming more narrow, you'll find that as you go wider, your adductor, and you'll be driving a lot more through your glute, especially at the bottom of the movement. But for you personally, what you should do is play around in your warm-ups with the different stances and see where you feel it best. But a general rule of thumb is closer is better for your quads, as long as you can open up your hips and get into full depth. Another really important, often overlooked thing when it comes to lifting on a hack squat, which is a compound movement, so it's very easy to throw all your muscle groups at it to move those heavy weights. But what you want to do is keep fixed. So of course, I mean your brace, tight core so that you don't hurt your lower back, but also in terms of your knees and your arms. Knees, of course, you don't want to be pressing and your knees to cave inwards. You're going to run into a lot of knee trouble. Similarly, you don't want to come outwards either, because although it's not as likely that it's going to cause injury as inwards knee caving, outwards knee caving can still damage your knee joint. So what we are trying to do is translate forward, so knees over toes, and then push out and up, forward and down, back and up. The only position we want our knees to go is forward, but that is not through moving the knee. That is through your ankle mobility, allowing your knees to translate forward, not you pushing your knees forward. So knees remain fixed. Similarly with our arms, what we want to do is remain tight when we perform the exercise. This will allow us to generate more force, allowing us to lift more weight and put more load upon our quads, but it will also allow us to keep the tension of the movement on our quads as well. What you'll find is if you start rattling about as you lift up, you won't be as strong. You may think you're working harder, but you're not working smarter, and you're not going to get the most out of the movement. Yes, when you struggle, you may wobble around to wriggle out that last rep, but that is not how you should be performing the majority of your set. Tight core, braced, elbows fixed, and then knees translating forward, of course, through ankle flexion. Okay, so we're back to another single leg exercise. This is the hip press. The reason why I perform this single leg is because of how I like to position my body. What you'll find is I'm slightly turned inwards. Because it's a hip press, what it is going to do is going to target the glutes as well as the quads, depending on how you set up the foot placement. Higher up, more adductors and glutes. Lower down, more quads, as you're going to get a lot more knee flexion for the amount of distance that the foot plate is traveling. So what I do is I turn it in a little bit to engage my glutes and work my lateralis, so the outside sweep of the quad. Although there is no real way to isolate the different muscle groups within the quad musculature itself, the glute fibers run similarly to the lateralis outside sweep of the quad, so training them synergistically is a very useful tip and a great benefit of using a single leg exercise, especially on an exercise like the hip press. So I'm turning in, getting that knee flexion while also getting some tension through the glute and really pushing it out through my hip. Like I mentioned with the leg extension about flexing the top of your quad, the same mind to muscle connection relates to this exercise. You want to think about pushing through that as well as pushing through the sole of your foot, not your heel, because pushing through your heel is going to activate your glute. Of course, we're doing it on this, but when we're trying to hit our quads, don't push through our heels too predominantly, as obviously we're going to get a lot of posterior involvement, but we don't want to push through our toes either, because that's going to put a lot of strain on our calves as well as our knees. So we're pushing through the sole and we're pushing through the mid foot, making sure that the whole foot stays on the pad, but we're aiming our force production to be outputted through the mid foot to maximize the use of our quads in the pressing exercise. Again, I run a 5x10 here. This is very crucial to control the changes of direction, of course, in terms of building the most muscle like in the other exercises, but more so in this for injury prevention. As a hip press, it is going to encourage your hips to rotate and flex, and what happens is if you have tight hip flexors and you don't control that beginning range of the movement, body length and range of the movement, you're going to get a lot of hip shift and a lot of hip tilt. You may have heard of butt wink when you squat. Your hips are going to flex and tilt upwards, and that's going to put a lot of strain on your lower back if you swing into that movement rather than controlling and keeping attention on the desired muscles, the quads and the glutes in this case as well. Okay, time to finish off with some weight PRs. This is the heaviest I've lifted and our fourth and final quad exercise of the quad workout. There is one more exercise after this, but this is the final quad exercise within the workout, and that is the squat press. I love this, especially over a regular leg press, just for the way that the foot plate and the carriage arcs into a comfortable position to press. A lot less lower back pain, a lot less stress in that length and range, and a more comfortable way for me personally, and most people I'd imagine, to perform the leg pressing exercise. Again, similarly to how I hack squat, I'm relatively narrow. I'm as low as I can, but I'm a little bit higher up due to the footwear that I'm wearing, giving me the heel elevation and allowing for greater ankle flexion. And I use a yoga foam block underneath my bum to help fix me into the movement and pull me into the machine, like I mentioned with the leg extension. Having the block allows for a straighter arm, a little bit of a bent arm. If you pull too hard, you're going to tear your bicep, and it's just relatively uncomfortable anyway. So it allows me to straighten out my arm and allows for my body to line up better with the machine in general, as it of course is acting like a booster seat. I would love to wear wrist straps and pull myself into the machine like I do with the leg extension. However, with this so much weight, having to wriggle out and put it back on if you don't have a spotter, it is very dangerous and just not worth it. But here I perform 2 sets. So my body and my legs are already warm and primed and almost on the way out at this point. So I don't necessarily need as many warm-up sets and those build-up pyramid sets. I can just jump straight into work. 1 all-out set and then 1 rest pause set, that which you will see after this. Of course, intensity, techniques and volume is the key to my leg growth. The intensity techniques allow you to train past the point of failure. What I mean by this is on the second set with the 300 kilos, I could only get 12 reps. Usually straight set, that is done. I take the extra rest and I get that 4, I get that 3, I get the extra 3. That's like another 10 reps past the point of failure where I failed initially. And then you'll see I moved into a drop set as well. Same principle applies. I can't get a sustainable and a great set out of the weight that I'm using, so I've dropped down and pushed past the point where I failed initially. And then that of course leads us into volume. I believe training higher rep ranges and training a greater amount of volume when it comes to leg training is crucial. That's just me personally, that's just how I like to train, and I have found it to be especially beneficial for my quad training, not only in terms of growth but for joint and muscle health as well. You'll see that obviously controlling the change of direction, pushing through my quads, mid-foot, and of course range of motion, no quarter rep knee bounces. We're really getting into that fully lengthened position. Not so much that we're like rolling over our abs and hunching over and condensing our body. We're still keeping the tension on the quads, but we're coming as far as our body allows us. And improving your hip mobility is only going to benefit your quad training as well. Okay, last exercise of the workout, we've got adductors. Your leg training is not complete if you do not train your adductors. They're not your quads, they're not your hamstrings, but they are a crucial part of your leg. It gives it that all-round thickness. Of course, I mentioned before, with the leg extensions, we're really working at the top of our quad here to get that sweep from the side view. We're hack squatting, building some density within our quads. The hip press, I'm really focusing on the outer sweep of my quad, my vastus lateralis, get that outward sweep on my quad. But that means we cannot neglect the inside and really make that round quad aesthetic from all angles and all views. Pull yourself into the machine is a common theme within training. The more fixed and stable your body is within a machine and it's not moving around, the more force you'll be able to generate with the intended muscle, therefore putting more stimulus on that muscle and therefore giving it the best opportunity to grow. What I also like to do is turn out my leg, because that begins to contract the adductor. So we've got that slight isometric contraction before we've even performed a rep. That means that when we do perform the adduction, the adductor itself is in the best position to take the most strain of the load, and therefore we are going to be using our adductors and training our adductors as opposed to the rest of our leg. What you'll find is if you turn your knees inwards and do it, you'll feel it in your glutes and your calves. So just turn out, try not to drive with your feet. You're really trying to drive with the inside of your knee, and think about, like I said, turning your knee out and flexing your adductor before you start your first rep of the set. I finish this with a 4x15, nice and high volume. It's a more niche muscle group and it's very easy for the agonistic muscles to contribute to this movement. So training it in a higher rep range will just allow us to isolate the muscle better and not have to resort to other muscles contributing to get the reps completed. But yeah, that is my current quad workout and some of my best tips and advice when it comes to quad training to get the most out of your quad training. And nobody wants small legs, especially when we're trying to grow and develop our physique. So I hope you did enjoy this video and you found these tips useful. If you did, be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, leave a comment down below any muscle groups that you want me to cover, any tips in your leg training that you yourself have found useful, and then share this video to a friend to bring them along the journey and benefit their quad training. So like I said, I hope you did enjoy it and I will catch you in the next video.